Before Sarah's world collapsed in that hospital room, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because stories like this remind us that sometimes the people we trust most can betray us in unimaginable ways. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I'm writing this from a hospital room in Seattle where I just gave birth to twins. Lily and Luke, my beautiful babies. They're sleeping in their bassinets right now, wrapped in soft blue and pink blankets, completely unaware that their world is about to shatter before it even begins. I should be happy. I should be glowing with that new mother joy everyone talks about. Instead, I'm staring at a stack of papers on my lap, my hands trembling so badly I can barely hold them. Divorce papers. My husband. No, I can't even call him that anymore. David walked into this room 2 hours ago. I thought he was bringing flowers, maybe balloons with "It's twins" written across them. I imagined him kissing my forehead, telling me how proud he was, how strong I'd been through the 18-hour labor. Instead, he stood at the foot of my bed with his lawyer's briefcase and those cold, empty eyes I'd never seen before. Eyes that used to look at me like I was his entire world. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said, his voice flat and distant. I remember laughing, actually laughing. Because surely this was exhaustion playing tricks on my mind. Surely my husband wasn't about to destroy our family hours after our children were born. But he opened that briefcase. He pulled out those papers, and he slid them across my blanket like he was closing a business deal. "I need you to sign these," David said, not even glancing at our sleeping babies. "My family, they've made their position clear. It's them, or you and the children. I've made my choice." The room started spinning. The machines monitoring my vitals started beeping faster. A nurse rushed in, but I barely noticed her. My husband had just chosen money over his own children. The nurse left after checking my blood pressure and giving David a look that could freeze hell. But he didn't care. He just stood there, waiting for me to sign away our marriage like it meant nothing. "David, what are you talking about?" My voice cracked, barely above a whisper. "These are your children. Our children. You can't just—" "I can, and I am." He pulled out a pen from his suit jacket, that expensive Mont Blanc I'd given him for our first anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on me. My mother made it very clear. If I stay with you, I lose everything. The company, the trust fund, my position in the family, everything my grandfather built. "Everything your grandfather built?" I repeated, my shock turning into something sharper. "What about everything we built? What about the life we planned? The nursery we painted together? The names we chose?" He finally looked at the twins, but there was nothing in his expression. No love, no regret, no recognition that these tiny humans were half of him. "They'll be fine. You'll be fine," he said, like he was convincing himself. "I'll make sure child support is handled through my lawyers. You won't struggle financially." "Financially?" I wanted to scream, but Lily stirred in her bassinet, and I forced myself to stay quiet. "You think this is about money?" David placed the pen on top of the papers. "Sign them, Sarah. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "Harder than it needs to be?" Tears were streaming down my face now. "You're abandoning your newborn children. How could this possibly be harder?" He didn't answer. He just stood there, checking his watch like he had somewhere more important to be. And that's when I realized the man I married was gone. I didn't always live in Seattle. I grew up in a small town in Oregon where everyone knew everyone, and dreams felt too big for the streets we walked on. My parents ran a modest bookstore, and I knew from age 16 that I wanted more than that quiet life. I studied interior architecture at Portland State, working 3 jobs to pay tuition because my parents couldn't afford to help. I was good at it. Really good. My professors said I had vision, that I could transform spaces in ways most designers couldn't see. So at 22, with $900 and a portfolio of student work, I packed my Honda and drove north to Seattle. My parents warned me it was too expensive, too competitive, too risky. But I went anyway. Those first months were brutal. I worked as a barista, took freelance projects for $50, lived on ramen in a studio apartment that cost more than my parents' mortgage. I remember crying in the shower, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. But I pushed through. I built a small client base. I started getting real projects. Small offices, boutique renovations, residential consultations. Nothing glamorous, but it was mine. My work. My vision. I was finally beginning to breathe when I met David. Looking back now, holding my twins in this hospital room with divorce papers on my lap, I realized something. I was happy before him. Struggling, exhausted, eating cereal for dinner, but happy. I had purpose, direction, independence. David didn't save me from anything. I didn't need saving, but he made me believe that love could be the foundation for something even bigger. That partnership could amplify success instead of diminish it. What a beautiful, devastating lie that turned out to be. If I could go back to that café, I'd walk right past his table and save myself years of heartbreak. But then I wouldn't have Lily and Luke. And they're the only good thing that came from loving David Thornton. Drop a comment below. Would you have fought back against the Thorntons, or would you have walked away? Let me know what you think. It was raining that Tuesday when I ducked into a cafe on Pine Street, desperate for Wi-Fi and coffee before a client presentation. Every table was taken except one in the back where a man sat alone, surrounded by architectural blueprints. Mind if I sit here? I asked, my laptop dying and time running out. He looked up with these intense green eyes and smiled. Only if you tell me why you look like you're fleeing a crime scene. I laughed despite my stress. Client meeting. Dying technology. The usual disaster. Interior designer? He asked, nodding at my portfolio. Architect. Trying to be, anyway. I sat down. You? Real estate development. David. Sarah. What started as a desperate table share turned into 3 hours of conversation. He was charming, helpful, genuinely interested in my work. He bought me coffee, helped fix my presentation, made suggestions that were actually brilliant. When he asked for my number, I felt those dangerous butterflies. He called the next day, then the day after. Within weeks, we were inseparable. Dinners in Fremont, walks through the sculpture park, late nights talking about buildings and dreams. But there were signs I ignored. He never talked about his family beyond they're complicated. When his mother called, he'd step outside to answer. He paid for everything in cash, never credit cards with his name on them. When I suggested meeting his parents, he'd change the subject so smoothly I barely noticed. They're very private people, he'd say. Old money. You know how it is. But I didn't know. I came from a bookstore family where everyone was welcome at our dinner table. 3 months in, he told me he loved me. 6 months later, we moved in together. 1 year later, he proposed. I thought I was building a life with an honest man who happened to work in real estate. I had no idea I was marrying into a family that would see me as a threat to their empire from day one. David proposed on our building's rooftop with the Space Needle glowing in the distance. I cried so hard I could barely say yes. We got married 3 months later in Discovery Park. 30 people, wildflowers, vows we wrote ourselves. His family didn't attend. My mother's in Europe, David said. My father has business in New York. They send their congratulations. I believed him because I loved him. But the truth started leaking through in small, poisonous drops. 2 weeks after our wedding, David's sister Madison called at midnight, drunk and angry. You have no idea what you've done, she slurred, before David grabbed the phone and hung up. He said she was unstable, jealous, that I should ignore her. A month later, a letter arrived at our apartment. Cream-colored stationery, expensive paper. Victoria Thornton's handwriting was sharp and precise. We need to discuss your future with our son. This marriage complicates certain family arrangements. David tore it up. She's old-fashioned. Give her time. But time only made things worse. His mother started calling constantly. David would step onto the balcony, his voice tight and low. When he came back inside, he'd be tense, distant. She wants me to come to Bellevue alone, he'd say. Family business. He'd return from those visits hollow-eyed and silent. When I got pregnant with the twins, I thought it might change things. Surely grandchildren would soften Victoria's heart, would make the family accept me. David's face went pale when I showed him the positive test. Not happy pale, scared pale. We need to be careful, he whispered. My family, they have expectations about heirs, bloodlines. This complicates everything. Complicates? I touched my stomach. David, we're having babies. Your babies. But he was already on his phone, texting someone. I realized now he was texting his mother, telling her he'd failed to control me, that I'd trapped him. I finally met David's family when I was 4 months pregnant with the twins. Victoria Thornton didn't invite me. She summoned me. David received a formal dinner invitation to the family estate in Bellevue, and this time, there was no excuse he could make. His mother's assistant called 3 times to confirm we'd both be attending. Just be yourself, David said nervously, as we drove through the gates of the Thornton estate. And maybe don't mention that you're from Oregon, or that your parents own a bookstore. Why not? I asked, my hand instinctively going to my small baby bump. Because my mother has Expectations. Expectations. That word would haunt me. The estate was massive, a French Renaissance mansion surrounded by manicured gardens that probably cost more to maintain than most people's houses. A valet took our car, an actual valet. I was wearing my nicest dress, and I suddenly felt like I'd showed up to a gala in sweatpants. Victoria Thornton stood in the marble foyer like a queen greeting peasants. Tall, blonde, perfectly preserved in that way only serious money can achieve. Her pearl necklace probably cost more than my college education. David, darling. She kissed the air near his cheeks. Then her ice blue eyes landed on me. And this must be Sarah. The way she said my name, like it tasted wrong in her mouth. Mrs. Thornton, it's wonderful to finally meet you, I said, extending my hand. She looked at it for a long moment before giving it the briefest touch. Yes, well, come in. Dinner is nearly ready. The dining room could have seated 20 people. Crystal chandeliers, oil paintings of stern-looking Thornton ancestors, silverware that gleamed under the lights. David's father, Richard, barely acknowledged my existence beyond a grunt. His younger sister, Madison, was too busy texting to look up. Throughout dinner, Victoria interrogated me with the precision of a prosecutor. Where did you attend university, dear? Portland State. I studied interior architecture. Portland State. A pause loaded with judgment. How practical. And your family? My parents own a bookstore in Ashland. It's small, but they love it. Another pause. I see. And tell me, Sarah, what exactly attracted you to my son? The question hung in the air like poison. David's hand found mine under the table, squeezing too hard. I love him, I said simply. We met in a café and he made me laugh. He's kind and smart, and how convenient that he's also heir to a fortune worth $400 million. Victoria interrupted, dabbing her lips with a cloth napkin. My face burned. I didn't know who he was when we met. David never... Of course you didn't, dear. Her smile was sharp as glass. I'm sure it was all very romantic. But let me be clear. The Thornton name has standards, legacy, expectations. If you truly care about my son's future, you'll understand what's at stake. David stayed silent. He just sat there, gripping his wine glass, saying nothing while his mother tore me apart. That night, I realized I'd married into a family that would never accept me. I just didn't know how far they'd go to get rid of me. The twins were born on a cold February morning, 18 hours of labor. Every contraction a reminder that I was doing this essentially alone. David had been distant for weeks. He stopped coming to the ultrasound appointments. He slept in the guest room. He took calls from his mother in hushed tones behind closed doors. When I tried to talk to him, he'd say he was stressed about work, about the company, about things I wouldn't understand. But I understood perfectly. His family was applying pressure, and he was breaking under it. The night before I went into labor, I found him in his office at 2 a.m, staring at his laptop screen with hollow eyes. David, please talk to me, I begged. What's happening? What did your mother say to you? He closed the laptop. She gave me an ultimatum, Sarah. Sign a post-nuptial agreement that removes you from any inheritance or I'm out of the company, out of the family trust, out of everything. Then we'll be out, I said, my hand on my enormous belly. We don't need their money. We can build our own life. You don't get it. He stood up so fast his chair fell backward. I've worked my entire life for this company. It's not just money, Sarah. It's my legacy, my purpose. Without it, I'm nothing. You're a father, I whispered. Doesn't that matter? He didn't answer. That silence told me everything. 24 hours later, I was holding our babies in that hospital room, and David walked in with divorce papers. He placed his Mont Blanc pen on top of the documents one more time. Just sign them, Sarah. My lawyers will handle everything. You'll get child support, a settlement. You won't be left with nothing. I'll be left without my husband, I said, tears streaming down my face. Our children will be left without their father. They'll understand when they're older. His voice was cold, rehearsed, like he'd practiced this speech with his mother. This is what's best for everyone. Best for the Thornton fortune, you mean? He didn't deny it. I looked down at Lily and Luke, so small and innocent, completely unaware that their father was abandoning them for money, for a legacy built by people who valued dollars over human beings, and something inside me snapped, not into pieces, into steel. Get out, I said quietly. Sarah, get out. My voice was stronger now. Leave your papers. Leave your pen. Leave your empty promises. But get out of this room before I call security. David stood there for one more moment, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret, maybe, or fear. But then it was gone. He straightened his tie, picked up his briefcase, and walked out of our lives. I didn't sign the papers that day. Not because I wanted to fight for our marriage, that was already dead, but because I refused to make it easy for him. David Thornton chose his family's fortune over his own children. I chose to survive. The first month alone was hell. I moved out of our loft into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in Beacon Hill. My savings evaporated within weeks. Diapers, formula, medical bills. Everything cost twice what I'd budgeted because there were 2 babies, not 1. David's lawyers sent cold corporate letters with child support checks. No personal messages. No questions about the twins. Just money, as if that could replace a father. My freelance clients disappeared. Who wants to hire an interior architect who can't meet in person because she's got screaming infants? I couldn't afford childcare. I couldn't afford anything. One night at 3 a.m., both twins crying, me crying, I looked around my apartment with its peeling paint and broken heater and thought, this is rock bottom. Then Lily grabbed my finger with her tiny hand, and something inside me turned to steel. I couldn't change what David did, but I could control what happened next. I started with necessity. Baby clothes were expensive and the twins grew so fast, so I bought a used sewing machine for $40 on Craigslist and taught myself to sew using YouTube videos during their naps. Simple onesies first, then blankets, then these little knit hats with animal ears that made the twins look adorable. My neighbor Mrs. Chen asked me to make one for her grandson. I charged $15, she told her daughter. Suddenly I had 5 orders. I created an Instagram account, Little Wonders Co. I posted pictures of the twins wearing my creations, faces hidden for privacy, and wrote captions about choosing to create instead of collapse, about turning pain into purpose. One post went viral. A parenting blogger with 200,000 followers shared it. This mama is doing it all. Overnight, I had 10,000 followers. Orders flooded in. I hired 2 single moms from my building to help sew. We worked in my living room, babies playing on blankets, building something real. That's when the first threat arrived. An email from a Thornton Properties corporate account. Cease and desist use of the name Wonders, as it infringes on Thornton Luxury Living's trademark, Wonder Homes. It was absurd. Completely different industries. But the message was clear. They were watching me. I ignored it and kept working. Within 6 months, Little Wonders Comer was generating real income. Within 8 months, I'd paid off my credit cards. Within 10 months, local boutiques wanted to carry my products. Then the second threat came. A formal legal letter claiming one of my blanket designs was substantially similar to textile patterns used in Thornton Properties model homes. My lawyer laughed. This is harassment, not a real case. But Victoria Thornton wasn't trying to win legally. She was trying to intimidate me into disappearing, to make sure I stayed small, stayed poor, stayed beneath the Thornton name. She wanted me to remember my place, abandoned, alone, powerless. What she didn't realize was that abandonment had made me dangerous, because I had nothing left to lose. The lawsuit hit me like a freight train. Thornton Properties LLC wasn't just threatening anymore. They were suing Little Wonders Co. for $500,000 in damages for willful copyright infringement and trademark violations. My lawyer Jennifer spread the documents across her desk. This is a SLAP suit, strategic lawsuit against public participation. They're not trying to win. They're trying to bankrupt you with legal fees until you give up. Can they do that? They can try. And with their resources, they can drag this out for years. She looked at me seriously. Sarah, fighting this could cost you everything you've built, but surrendering would cost me more. The attacks came fast and brutal. Anonymous social media accounts, clearly bought and paid for, flooded my Instagram with comments. Gold digger couldn't trap him with a baby, so now she's stealing from his family. Those poor kids having her as a mother. She got pregnant on purpose, and now she's playing victim. My business email was hacked. Customer orders were canceled. Suppliers suddenly refused to work with me, citing reputational concerns. Someone leaked my home address online. I had to take the twins and stay with Mrs. Chen for 3 nights, because strange cars kept circling my building. Then Home Nest Markets called. Ms. Mitchell, given the current legal complications and negative publicity, we need to postpone our partnership discussion indefinitely. Postpone. The corporate word for never. I sat in Jennifer's office, staring at another stack of legal motions the Thorntons had filed. discovery requests designed to bury me in paperwork, depositions scheduled to consume weeks of my time. They want you to quit, Jennifer said quietly. To sign away your business, maybe agree to never use certain words or patterns, accept a gag order about the divorce. What would Victoria consider acceptable? I asked. Probably you disappearing entirely, moving to another state, changing your name, certainly never speaking publicly about David or the family. I looked at the framed photo on Jennifer's desk, her daughter graduating from law school. How did you afford to put her through school? Scholarships, loans, and a lot of night shifts waitressing. She smiled. Why? Because I need to know that fighting powerful people who want to destroy you is actually possible to win. It is, but it's ugly, expensive, and exhausting. Good. I stood up, because I'm not backing down. I want to countersue for harassment, malicious prosecution, and emotional distress. I want to demand their internal communications about me. I want discovery on how they've used their wealth to intimidate other people. Jennifer's eyes widened. Sarah, that's declaring war. No, I said, thinking of my twins sleeping safely with Mrs. Chen, thinking of the 15 women who depended on Little Wonder's comber for their income, thinking of every night I'd cried myself to sleep while Victoria Thornton slept in her mansion. Victoria Thornton declared war when she made her son choose money over his children. I'm just finally fighting back. The countersuit changed everything. Jennifer filed demands for internal Thornton communications, financial records, and documentation of their business practices. Within 48 hours, we hit gold. Emails between Victoria and David discussing handling the Sarah problem and eliminating her business before it becomes embarrassing to the family name. But I didn't want a quiet settlement. I wanted the truth. I called Seattle Morning Live myself. I have a story about a powerful family using lawsuits to silence a single mother. Interested? They were very interested. The interview aired on a Thursday morning. I sat on that couch with Lily and Luke in matching Little Wonder's outfits and told everything. The divorce papers in the hospital, the harassment, the frivolous lawsuit designed to bankrupt me. I showed the emails, Victoria's own words about eliminating my business. They sued me because I survived, I said, looking directly into the camera. Because I built something beautiful after their son abandoned his own children. Because I refused to disappear. The segment went viral within hours. 20 million views in 2 days. By Friday afternoon, the Seattle Times was running an expose on Thornton Properties' history of using legal threats against small businesses and former employees. Turns out I wasn't their first victim, just their first to fight back publicly. By Monday, 3 major investors pulled out of Thornton Properties' latest development project. The company's stock dropped 18%. By Wednesday, Home Nest Markets called back. Ms. Mitchell, we'd like to reschedule that meeting and expand the partnership to 75 stores. The Thorntons' lawyer called Jennifer with a settlement offer. Drop the countersuit, accept $2 million, sign an NDA. Tell them no, I said. I want a public apology from Victoria Thornton, acknowledgement that their lawsuit was baseless, and I want them to donate $5 million to a foundation supporting single mothers building businesses. They'll never agree to that. Then we go to trial, and I'll make sure every ugly detail becomes public record. They agreed within 24 hours. The press conference was held at the Thornton Properties headquarters. Victoria stood at the podium, her face a mask of barely contained fury, and read the statement her lawyers had written. Every word an admission of defeat. I stood in the back of the room, holding Luke, with Lily in Mrs. Chen's arms, and watched the woman who'd tried to destroy me publicly admit she'd been wrong. 6 months later, David showed up at my door. Not with lawyers this time, just tears and regret. I've left the family business, he said. I want to be part of their lives. Part of your life. I'll do anything. No, I said simply. Sarah, please, I made a mistake. I chose wrong. But I love. You chose money over your children when they were hours old. I interrupted. That's not a mistake. That's who you are. I closed the door on David Thornton for the last time. Little Wonders Co. went national the following year. The foundation we created has helped 200 single mothers start their own businesses. And me? I'm building an empire. One stitch, one choice, one victory at a time. The Thorntons wanted me to disappear. Instead, I made sure no one would ever forget my name. If Sarah's story inspired you, smash that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear that survival is possible. And stick around for the next story.